My name's David Crocker. I work in a nursing home. As a hobby, I do military history. I end up working around a lot of seniors, and it's resulted in me amassing a rather large collection of memorabilia. I ended up coming into Douglas Cox's collection. The interesting thing for me in the whole collection was the Escaping Society blazer.
Short of being killed in combat, getting shot down over enemy territory was probably the worst nightmare for Allied pilots and aircrew in the Second World War. Parachuting from a crashing plane wasn't an easy task, and the parachute itself was a target for enemy fire. Once on the ground, and hopefully without serious injury, an airman had to find a place to hide and then figure out how to make his way back to Allied territory. This could mean traveling hundreds of miles through unfamiliar surroundings and often not knowing the local language. Resistance fighters who worked clandestinely to undermine the occupying Germans could be a downed airman's best hope for survival.
Well, I'd like to welcome Dave. His brought a collection of items that tell a very fascinating and interesting story.
Today we have Douglas Cox's collection. He was a flight lieutenant. He was shot down over France near the Luxembourg border and managed, with the help of the French resistance, to escape down to Spain and back into the war. Today I brought along his Escaping Society blazer, his tan summer's uniform, his flight log, and some cap badges. These are his medal ribbons. He would have received the France and Germany Star. He would have received the Aircrew Star. He would have received the Volunteer Service Medal, as well as the King George Medal and the Defense Medal. But he also was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, which is what this ribbon here with the purple stripes signifies.
Doug was shot down March 1943. He was part of number 7 Squadron, Pathfinder Squadron. They were led by Hamish Mahady, and they were really accurate navigation. Obviously, Doug was a very good navigator because he would have been attached to this squadron. The unfortunate thing, this was their 5th mission with this particular crew, and the chances of getting shot down were certainly increasing every time they flew at night. The RAF at this point were targeting cities, and they were moving towards the big battles that were going to come up over the winter of 1943, which they went after Berlin. And their target that night was the raid to Munich. Unfortunately, Doug's crew and aircraft were shot down prior to actually reaching Germany. They were shot down over Luxembourg-French border. The crew did get out. Unfortunately, the pilot didn't, and most of the crew ended up either escaping or being POWs.
I know that Doug had managed to hide out in a mill and had approached a farmhouse where the elderly couple that were there provided him with directions on how to get to Paris. What would he have gone through to manage to get out of France and get to Spain like he did?
At this point in the war, the British government had certainly set up MI9. We've all heard of MI5 and MI6. MI9 was the organization that was providing resistance and counterinsurgents within mainland Europe, particularly in France. Of course, over time, they ran into issues where they were infiltrated by the Gestapo or, in those lines, shot down, and then they had to remuster and do it. But there was a whole network of spies being moved back and forth at this point in the war. And the RAF were doing night missions, flying Lysander aircraft into French fields, taking crew out and moving them out, and also bringing spies in. It would be very much a lucky streak of moving in and finding the right person that's going to get you into that. But there's an establishing network of lines. And this particular line that Doug was involved in was called the Comet Line. He moved along the line to Spain and then ultimately through to Gibraltar, and then was a troop ship out of Gibraltar back to the UK. And he ended up coming out of Gibraltar in mid-July of 1943. The other interesting part is the fact that he went back into service flying bomber aircraft again, flying with the 433 Squadron, which was an RCF squadron at this point. So with this fantastic collection is a series of correspondence, telegrams from the military informing his parents of his missing in action.
At one point, a letter came from the Air Ministry saying that the International Red Cross had contacted one of the flight crew that had been taken prisoner of war, and he had reported him dead, of course, as a way to hide the fact that his fellow crew members had escaped. I couldn't even imagine the amount of anxiety that would go with receiving letters like these. I think the most touching thing for me that I found in amongst these letters was a letter from a lady from Ekim Bridge. A total stranger to his mom had written, telling her not to give up faith, that her son was missing as well. and that the Germans will tell you just about anything to try to break our morale. I thought that was very special, that a total stranger would write her because her son was on the list of missing in the newspapers.
So let's just briefly talk about this badge.
This badge on the blazer is representative of the Royal Air Force Escaping Society that was started after the war by service personnel who had escaped from occupied Nazi territory and rejoined the war effort. There was about 300 Canadians who belonged to that society, and they started annual reunions. During those reunions, what they did was they would bring over the people that helped them. They would sponsor them to come over, spend a couple of weeks in Canada, and join them at their reunions. With Doug, one lady came with him. It was the lady that hit him in the cafe, and they ended up going on from Montreal to Vancouver to the big reunion.
The citizens of particularly France and also obviously of Spain put their lives on risk to do this. And I think that his gratitude obviously shows through here in the story as well. Dave, again, thank you so much for bringing this great collection and preserving it and being able to share it with future generations and for being able to identify exactly what the story tells.
You're welcome. Thank you for hosting me.
How did you get this great collection?
I met his wife at an exhibit I was doing at the Lighthouse Museum in Lower La Have. She invited me to her home, and I went and sat and had coffee and war cake, which was really nice. She's a sweet lady, and she brought out the letters, and as we were sitting and talking, she started bringing more and more things up, all kinds of memorabilia that she said had been in her basement for years. I ended up looking at her and asked her, what are you planning to do with this? And she just simply looked at me and said, I'm giving it to you. It's been a great honor for me to receive all of this. It's a great way for me, with the rest of the collection that I have, to travel around to other museums. When I can get into schools and educate. For a lot of people, they come into these displays and start to tell me about their parents, their grandparents, their uncles and aunts, and those who had served during the war. And for the veterans, I think probably the biggest thing for them is to know that they're not forgotten and what they did matters. I'm more than happy to come to your museum sometime.
Absolutely, and we're more than happy to host you.
I'll look forward to hearing from you on that. I've started doing this as a way to remember my father. My father served in the Royal Canadian Navy for 25 years, and we unfortunately lost him shortly after he left the Navy in a car accident. There's no better way to remember my father, those he served with, and those who served our country, than to go out and teach what they did and show people what they did. And this is what's become of it.